And let's keep going. I guess I'll dim the lights for us here. Good, yeah. So, the second part of class today is we're going to talk about this final life of the Buddha. So, we were talking about kind of his pre-life and leading up to this life, and we're going to jump back to that in a second just to kind of fill in any blanks from our discussion. Uh, but I thought this would be a nice summary for you. When we think about, what is his path to enlightenment? Of course, spoiler alert, the Buddha achieves enlightenment. And so how did he get there? There's kind of three things. So the first thing we haven't really talked about yet, but it comes even before he's alive. I think at least in some of the breakout groups I was in, we discussed this. He's a special being. And why is he a special being? It's not, if we compare it to Jesus, it's not because he's like God's son or something like that. It's just because he did a lot of good stuff, right? He had many previous lives of dedication to enlightenment, right? He's this bodhisattva. He's on this path to enlightenment. And so it all really begins with this vow. He vows that he's going to do it. He says, I'm going to achieve enlightenment. I'm going to do what it takes. And then thousands of lifetimes, right? This isn't even like just a few, right? This isn't enough that you can really capture in a movie. So again, that's probably why they left it out. But thousands of lifetimes. There are thousands of stories about the Buddha in his previous lives. Maybe thousands is an exaggeration, but certainly dozens, if not hundreds. And so, yeah, many, many, many lifetimes of effort. And across these lifetimes, he's constantly learning things and improving, right? There's almost a sense of, this is a ongoing project, this pursuit of enlightenment. And then finally, he has this final life where he achieves enlightenment. And that's what we're really focusing on today. And so his life during, or his name during this final lifetime is Siddhartha Gautama. And theoretically, this whole large inter-life, multiple lifetime story really climaxes with this life as the prince in India, Siddhartha Gautama. Again, he lived 2,500 years ago. This was a real historical figure. And what people try to do, again, with kind of the blind man and the elephant thing, they say, okay, what is historical about him? We can say the city he was born in, we can say the name of his parents, we can say he was probably a prince, he was probably of the warrior caste. We can say a lot of historical things about him. But the reality is, just like Jesus, the historical pursuit of Jesus, people have tried to figure out historical things about Jesus. You can't really do it, right? In the end, there are too many stories, there are too many legends, there's too much on these multiple lives and that sort of thing. So as you can tell, the approach that I'm taking in this class is we just embrace it, right? Rather than say this is true and that's false, this is real history and that's myth or something like that. We're going to just take it all together, right? And who knows which is which and which is true and which is false. This is the way that the tradition presents itself, right? So you might be wondering, what is this vow all about? So if we jump back, again, this is left out of the movie edition, but he's up in heaven, right? We said he was a god before his final life. So we could say his penultimate life. You guys familiar with this word? Penultimate? It's a good word. Is it two ends? Penultimate is one end. Penultimate. So it means his second to last, right? You guys probably knew that. His second to last life, he is up in heaven. He's one of the gods, and he looks down and he sees all these problems with the world, right? It's almost like he's looking at America right now and he's thinking, oh, they're in trouble. I'm going to go down and help them out. He sees all these people who are suffering from ignorance, poor mental health, horrible circumstances, short lifespans, poor health. I will set free those who are not free. I will give relief to those who have no relief. I will liberate from suffering those who are not liberated from suffering. And so he makes this vow, right? He's vowing that he will do it. Have you guys ever made a vow before? When do people take vows or make vows?
At weddings.
At weddings, yeah. Why do people make vows or take vows at weddings? What's the whole point of that?
Is it to like um I'm trying to think of like the words, but like it's like you choose to do it for the rest of your life kind of thing.
So Raffaele says committing to make a promise. Yeah, commitment, promises, those are good. Yeah, and I can't claim a lot of personal experience with this sort of thing, but I guess actually no, I'll take that back. I do have a lot of experience with this sort of thing. When it comes to relationships, sometimes you hit roadblocks, let's say, right? And if you have this initial commitment, right? If you say, I'm going to stick through this with you in sickness and in health, right? For better, for worse, all these sorts of things, till death do us part, then you are more likely to actually be there for someone when they need you. You know what I mean? Right? So let's say your partner gets sick. You've made this commitment. You've promised to them that you will be there for them, and they have promised to be there for you. And so there's something very similar happening here. The Buddha is making a promise. He's making a commitment. What is he promising to do? He's going to help everybody, right? It comes back to this sense of compassion. I think we saw that up here. There's so many slides, it's hard to say. Yeah, compassion. He's a savior. He's a being whose empathy for the suffering of others is so profound, he cannot but act on their behalf. And so we see that being put into words here, right? He sees the suffering of all these different beings, and he thinks, I've got to go help them out. And so he makes all these commitments. He does come down in the form of an elephant. Here's a 2,000-year-old, I guess 1,800-year-old engraving or carving of this elephant entering his mother's womb. So they depicted that in the movie as kind of her dancing with the elephant, which was kind of weird. But yeah, she has a dream, and this is the form that the Buddha takes as he enters her womb. So just like the Jesus story, there's not a real big emphasis on sex here. Again, they don't really leave it out, but they don't really emphasize it either. He just sort of shows up. So it's not to say she was a virgin, though. It's just this particular instance, he shows up as an elephant for some reason. Very special elephant. Again, very old image, and so that's why it kind of continues on into the movie, even though it seems a little bit weird. We talked about his giant palace in his mother's womb, also pretty weird, but I think we discussed why that happened. There's also this sense of, yeah, this is actually worth emphasizing, is the idea of pain, right? So when the mother gave birth in the movie, maybe you guys remember, she's holding onto the branch. She's sort of like singing a song almost. Did you notice that? It's like hard to tell even what she's doing. But it looks like, and I think even the voiceover said he was born with no pain, right? Or almost no pain. Now, does birth usually go so smoothly? Usually not, right? Usually birth is actually very painful. And so, I'm sure you all took biology class in high school and are familiar with these things. But in Buddhism, there's this set of 4 types of suffering: birth, aging, sickness, and death. It's a very common quadrad, we could say. And we'll see 3 of them again in a moment. But this 4th one, the birth, is actually not so central part of the story. And, when I was first learning about Buddhism, I remember thinking like, okay, old age, that kind of sucks. You get old, everything falls apart, your hair turns a weird color, your skin gets wrinkly, kind of sucks, right? Getting sick, terrible, right? America is crippled with disease right now, so clearly that's terrible. Death, horrible to even think about, obviously. But when it came to birth, especially when I was a young man, I was like, is that really so bad? Like, why is birth so bad? And I asked like a teacher about this. Like, I was at some Buddhist teaching, and it was like a lama, right? A Buddhist monk who was lecturing, and he's like, think about it this way, right? It's like, from the perspective of the mother, obviously there's just all this blood, there's all this difficulty pushing, breathing. It takes hours. In a medical hospital, there's often drugs involved, right, to make it possible. Somebody like me, if I saw it, I'd probably pass out because I get kind of queasy around these sorts of things, right? Very difficult for the mom, and not only for the mom, right, for the baby too. And again, there's sort of a misogyny streak to this tradition. They often do take the perspective of the baby rather than the mother. And they say the baby is also being squeezed through this tight little canal, right? A place where the baby really has no business being. And yet out he comes. Often it's dangerous for the mom. It's often dangerous for the baby, especially in the old days, right? Before modern medicine. But even now, right? infant mortality rate is certainly not zero. I don't know what it is in America, but it's certainly not zero. And so it's a dangerous, difficult, painful, kind of horrible experience, right? And so when we think about the way that the Buddha was born, which is what we were discussing before, this fact that there's no pain, right? That she felt no pain, also kind of builds this image, right? He is special. He's here to help relieve others of pain rather than bring it upon them, right? Now his mother dies, and the story kind of protests a little bit. The Bodhisattva was not the cause of her death. No, the Bodhisattva did not bring about her death. It's almost like it protests too much, right? You could imagine a version of this story where she does die due to complications from his birth. But for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. She dies very young, and he is raised by, I believe it's his father's sister, Mahaprajapati. It's not her sister, and so he has this aunt who kind of takes his mother's place, and we'll see her again too. Okay, and then there are prophecies, and then we'll finally get to the intermission part. So what is the prophecy? So when he comes out, these wise men show up, and they kind of do like astrology. I know astrology is kind of becoming more popular these days. People talk about, are you this sign, are you that sign? I'm a Capricorn. My birthday was about a month ago. And so the astrologers show up, they do his charts and that sort of thing, but they get more specific than just Capricorn and Aquarius and whatever else. They make basically a proclamation, let's say, that if the Buddha follows this path, then he will become a world-conquering king. If the Buddha follows another path, then he will be this great saint, right? So in the words of the book, he would either, if he remains at home, he will become this incredibly powerful king. If he abandons home, he will become the transcendent one. And so it actually repeats a few different times. It's a little bit redundant. Again, because it's translation, that's just sort of the way that the story flows. But this is really important, right? So there are a lot of Greek stories that begin with prophecies. Have you guys ever heard of like Oedipus Rex? Does that ring a bell? Yeah. Do you know what the prophecy is in Oedipus Rex? What was the prophecy? Yeah, exactly. Kill his father, marry his mother, and of course that is what happens. And because it is a Greek tragedy, it's almost because of the prophecy, because the prophecy was made and people tried to resist it, they actually end up forcing it to happen, right? It's one of the kind of the perplexing parts of that story. The family hears this prophecy, they abandon the kid, right? They put him out on like a hill, and these farmers pick him up and whatever else. And eventually he doesn't know his parents, and he kills them, and he marries his mother. And once he figures it out, it's a very horrible ending. There's something kind of similar happening here, right? A prophecy is made, and what do you think his father is going to say? Does his father want him to be an all-conquering king, or does he want him to be some kind of hippie religious studies teacher? What do you think his father, who of course his father is the king, what do you think his father wants?
The king?
He wants him to be a king, right? That's what all kings want. They want a powerful male child to uphold their lineage, right? That's a classic sort of patriarchal story. And we see that happening here too. So when he hears this advice that if the son leaves home, he will become this hippie religious studies teacher, he decides to keep his son at home. But he doesn't force him to stay at home, right? The way he does it, he makes him very comfortable. And maybe this is even sort of familiar, right? He just gives his son everything he could ever want, all the food he could ever want to eat, all the comforts of life he can offer to his son. He wants to protect him from any sort of suffering, because he has the sense that if my son is ever uncomfortable, then he might leave home, and then he might become this religious figure. And so that's kind of where our story picks up. Okay, questions about all that? How's that sound? Good. Okay, So here's a question. I think let's not do breakout rooms. We could probably fit another breakout room in. We've got a whole hour, but not right now. Let's just open this up right now for everybody to consider. So we've got all these different sides to the Buddha, right? He's a human being. He's also the cosmos. He's this bodhisattva. He was a god. He knows everything. It seems like he's very capable. He's very skillful, and yet he also is sort of struggling and learning and eventually working up toward enlightenment, but making mistakes and sort of failing along the way. How do we resolve this contradiction? So we have this contradiction. He's a human on the one hand, and yet he seems to already be enlightened even from the beginning. How do the authors of this book make sense of this? Did you guys pick up on this contradiction? Did you see where it shows up in the story? I'll type it in the chat. We've got a contradiction. We've got a imperfect. Maybe we don't have to call him imperfect. He's kind of perfect. We've got a human who is young and makes mistakes, but he is also the cosmos. How do we reconcile this? So one place where this shows up, for example, is learning, right? The Buddha, he is this primordially enlightened being, right? He has these lifetimes of achievement, and yet he still has to go to class, right? How do we make sense of that? How do they resolve this contradiction? Why is he going to class? Another one is, so he's this omniscient one who is learning. Another way to think about this too is he is this desireless one who is getting married. Why is an omniscient one going to class and learning? Why is someone who has overcome their desires and their negative emotions getting married? How do we make sense of this? And chapter 4 is all about education, so we could look there to find it. Chapter 5 is called harem, which refers to his multiple wives that he has throughout his life. So actually, it's really these two chapters where we see this the most. He's growing up, right? And again, if we think about the life story of Jesus, he conveniently disappears in his teens, right? We get a little baby Jesus, and then he just kind of shows up after he's figured a bunch of stuff out. We kind of leave out these young growth periods from the life of Jesus, right? And so one reason is it's a contradiction. It's sort of difficult to figure out. What do you do with the perfect human, with the somebody who is enlightened and overcome all of their problems? How do they learn? How do they grow? How do we make sense of this? So what's the solution? How do we resolve this contradiction? Can you guys think of anything? Why would the Buddha go to class? Are any of you guys Buddhas? Why are you coming to class? Is it too late for this kind of conversation? Maybe it's too late. All right, well, let's look at it. So, to help others. Okay, Gregory, very good. Yeah, so Greg, why would this help others? How does him going to class help others?
I'm not really clear how it would help others, but in the book it mentioned him teaching more to his grammar teacher helped open his view on certain things, and it helped, like, I think it was like 32,000 people reach enlightenment somehow.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, where does it say all the people achieving enlightenment? Yeah, exactly. So page 28. So that's a good place to look. So again, we're looking at chapter 4 if you don't have the physical copy. He's talking to his teacher, and just like Greg said, at that moment, 32,000 people were brought to complete enlightenment. And this is the reason that the Bodhisattva entered grammar school. So it even is very explicit in trying to solve this problem. Because again, it's a problem for them. As they're telling this story, this is a problem for them. And if you think about it, it would be like a student in our class coming in and saying, you know, Bill, when you teach this early life of the Buddha, you should really emphasize these aspects rather than those aspects. And, skillfully being able to sort of help me in my craft, lead me along into a place that I wouldn't have gone otherwise. And we see that happening here, right? They're talking about scripts Do you guys know about script? S-C-R-I-P-T. I have an example of the Brahmi script on the slide here. So script is different from a language, right? So the Brahmi script could write various different Indian languages, and there are many Indian languages. You could use a Tibetan script to write an Indian language. You could use the Roman script, right? The Roman alphabet to write a Sanskrit word or an Indian word or some other language word, right? So Buddha Shakyamuni would be taking that same language, but writing it in a different script. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but it's just to say there are many different ways of writing. And the Buddha knew a bunch of them. And he knew more than his teacher did. And so like Greg is saying, by going into the class, not only was he teaching his teacher, he was also so inspiring that 32,000 people achieved enlightenment. It feels a little hyperbolic, but that's what it says. And so there's a sense that he's doing these things for the sake of us, right? That coming to class is not for him, it's not for his sake, it's for the sake of others. He's there to enlighten others. The same goes for marriage, right? He gets married. Why does he get married? Is it because he's so attracted to his wife? Maybe, but no, not really. Siddhartha says, learned bodhisattvas came before me and taught through wives and sons and servants, not controlled by lust, good thoughts, not rent apart. So shall I teach according to their ways, right? So what is he saying here? Is that others have gotten married before him. People are getting married all around him, right? He is going to show people how to be a good husband, right? How to be a good partner in this life. So people can look to him for inspiration. And so again, if we come back to this contradiction, right? We've got this perfect being, this omniscient one, this desireless one who seems to be struggling and failing and learning and making difficult decisions. There's a sense that this is an enlightened play almost, right? It's almost like a big show that he is performing for all of us. But at the same time, it's not to say it's somehow insincere either. It's almost like it's operating on two different levels simultaneously. And so when we think about these different aspects of the Buddha, so many slides. Yeah, these are all operating at the same time, right? He is still human. He is still struggling. He is still getting married and having a family, but he's also doing these other things at the same time. And it's up to us to interpret all these different aspects of him. Okay, let's do one more video clip. I know that, again, the night feels like it's beginning to drag a little bit, but we still have a decent amount of time. So let's watch this. This is a scene about the 4 sights, which is another very important part of the Buddha life story. One might say this is a climax in his life. So before this, his father has taken good care of him and tried to keep him away from all the sufferings of life, to keep him in the castle, keep him in the palace. But now the Buddha gets out. Okay, so they're going to open the doors. Let me hit the right buttons here. I'm going to share sound and optimize. Yeah, can I? Let's see if that works. That should work. Okay, so here we go. As you watch this, I want you to think about, well, let's just watch it. We can go over the 4 sites afterward. Okay, here we go. Actually, yeah, Aiden's reminding me of a joke that I often make when I teach this. Who is this actor? Wait, let's get to him. Yeah, who is this actor? Now,
Am I
Aiden,
allowed to say? Or
yeah, go for it, Steven. Steven's good.
Keanu Reeves.
It's Keanu Reeves, everybody. That's right. I should have warned you. Keanu Reeves. It is John Wick. And as you will see, there's kind of a brown face thing happening here. Again, this movie has not aged particularly well, but you know, we'll try to see it for its benefits. Right?
Suddenly, however, through the crowd, the young prince saw something he had never seen before.
Chana! Chana! Who are those men? Tell me, who are those men?
They are men like the rest of us, my lord, who once sucked milk from their mother's breast.
And why do they look like that?
They are old, my lord.
What do you mean, old?
Old age destroys memory, beauty, and strength. In the end, it happens to us all, my lord.
To everyone? To you and to me?
It is better not to concern yourself with these things, my lord.
But where are they taking them?
Chana, what is wrong with those men? So yes, Keanu Reeves, before he was John Wick, before he was Neo in The Matrix, what was he going for with that accent? Yeah, seriously. Again, 1993, a lot has changed since then. And one is, I don't think they'd be giving that part to Keanu Reeves. Maybe they would, who knows, right? But yes, that is he. I guess, I don't know when Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure came out, but not long before that, right? This was a big shift of a role for him. So we got these 4 sites, and the clip I showed you does not get to them, but we got to see one site. Why was Keanu so surprised when he saw the old men? What was he so confused about?
is it because his like father never really like showed him anything? Like he was always surrounded by beautiful people.
Exactly. It's like he's in college all the time, right? Where everybody is approximately 20 years old, and maybe you'll get some old professors here or there, but they don't really count, right? Everybody's young and beautiful and healthy and having a good time, right? No, it's a little far-fetched, isn't it? This idea that he had never seen old people before. Have you guys seen old people before? Grandmas and grandpas and that sort of thing. And of course, if you, maybe in some ways what this is asking you to do is to see a little more closely, right? And in seeing him encounter old age for the first time, and he's disturbed by it, right? Why is he disturbed by it? What happens to him as he watches these old people? He says, Chana, what is wrong with those men? He says, old? What do you mean old? Does this happen to everybody? To you and to me? It's sinking in, right? This idea that he will get old one day. And so when we see old people, it's easy to think like, oh, that's just some old person with like a back problem and a cane. Actually, I feel like in New York, I see old people all the time. I've been here for, I guess, like 3 years now, not quite 3 years, 2.5 years. And in the suburbs or wherever, I've kind of been all over the place, but old people kind of stay at home. Maybe they go for a walk, whatever. But in New York, they're like rolling their carts out and go to the grocery store and, really very active to the point where like, I saw my neighbor going down the stairs. He had a cane in one hand. He had his like cart, his rolly cart in the other, and he's just making it down real slow. I was like, can I help you somehow? I just want to like put him in a backpack and take him to the store. It's like the guy could barely walk. And so in any case, here Keanu Reeves is having this realization, right? He's a young man, very, strong and healthy looking. And yet he has this realization, this is coming for me, right? Maybe not immediately, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day. But this is coming. This is in my future, right? This is a new realization for him. And by seeing it for the first time, it hits him in a way that perhaps it would not have hit him if it were more kind of natural part of his existence. And of course, we can expand that. So what are the 4 sites? We can look them up in the book, I suppose. Does anybody know off the top of their head? I already told you at the top of class. Actually, I told you 3 of the 4. I left one of them out. So what are the 4 sites? I gave you page.
I remember one was, I think he saw like a dead body, like a corpse.
Yeah.
And the other one, I think the book called it a merchant, but I'm pretty sure it's a bodhisattva, I believe what it was. It's like someone looking for enlightenment. And I can't remember what the last one was.
Okay, so let's just Old Man, Sick Man, Holy Man, very good. Guy and I are on the exact same page. Actually, no, sick and dead. So yeah, sick is the other one that we missed. Sick person, dead person, holy person, old person. Yeah, so those are the 4, right? So 3 of them are these sufferings, right? So sickness, I mentioned birth at the beginning, right? Birth, old age, sickness, and death. Here we've got old age, sickness, and death. What do old age, sickness, and death have in common? Obviously, they all kind of suck. They're all sufferings and so forth. Can we think of other things that they have to do with each other? What do those 3 things have in common? Yeah, sometimes they kind of interpenetrate, right? They all happen at some point. Yeah, so they're definitely all each leads to the other, right? As you get older, you often get sick and you often die. Good. Other things?
It's not so much like the sickness, but like old age and death, like status and money can't protect you from getting old and dying. Like that's something that's going to happen to you regardless.
Yeah.
Kind of unites everybody.
They're inevitable, right? If we continue to watch that scene, it might hit home a little bit more. I thought, just this one clip was enough, but he runs after them and he goes into this back alley and he sees these sick people and they're all like disfigured and it's very disturbing. And Shauna says, nobody is going to finish this life without getting sick at least once, right? And of course now, we're wearing our masks, we're living according to these COVID protocols. Disease is a very real part of our lives, right? And so old age, death, just like Sophie was saying too, Alexandra is saying as well, these are things that will happen to us. It's not a question of if, it is just when, right? When are we going to die? Because it's coming one day. And even though the framing of this story feels a little absurd, like how could he not know what death is? Who doesn't know what death is? Don't little kids learn about death when they're very young and ask a bunch of questions about it and that sort of thing? But what it encourages us to do is to see it with new eyes, right? To think about it in a bit more personal sort of way, because I don't know about you, but I don't wake up in the morning and think that I'm going to die anytime soon, right? I'm making plans. I've got my syllabus all laid out, right? I'm going to survive at least for this semester, aren't I? But you don't know that, right? You don't know that. And so this is the weight that is starting to fall on Keanu Reeves in this movie, is he's beginning to think, oh my God, all of these things are going to happen to me too. And so it's very disturbing for him, right? It's disturbing in such a way, just like Sophie put it very nicely, even if he's rich, even if he's powerful, he cannot keep these things away, right? If you think about what do rich and powerful people want other than more wealth and power, it is a solution to these problems. And Keanu Reeves happens to be a prince, and so he's going to look for a solution: birth, aging, sickness, and death. And of course, he sees this holy person. So this is the kind of last piece of the puzzle. In addition to seeing a dead body, a sick person, old age, and realizing that these are part of life, he also sees someone who's kind of relaxed about it, right? He's not so concerned. I mean, we can see it in this. This is a Thai representation, I'm pretty sure. And we see this person meditating. He looks like a monk here. That's a little anachronistic because there wouldn't have been Buddhist monks at this time. But he's surrounded by at least a sick person, maybe also an old person, and a dead body. And he seems pretty chill, right? He's just sitting there meditating. This is Siddhartha looking over at him, and he's wondering, like, hey, what does that guy know that I don't know, right? I'm learning all of these things about old age and death. What is giving him the peace of mind to be able to operate in this world, knowing what is waiting for him? And so this is the question that kind of occupies Siddhartha for the next many years of his life. We see it in the book. They talk about a person in robes. His appearance is so peaceful and gentle, right? After seeing all these sufferings of life, he's thinking, how do I learn to be satisfied knowing that death is in the background, right? Most of us learn to be satisfied by just not thinking about it and hoping that it doesn't come anytime soon. And then when it finally does come, we're very surprised, right? But what the Buddha, or the Bodhisattva, I guess I should say, the Buddha to be, what he wants to do is find a solution, right? Find an end to these problems. So what does he do? Well, one thing he does is he leaves home. And this is, I think of all the details in the life story of the Buddha, this is probably the least comfortable one. And in most tellings, he's already a father. You know, he's married, he has a wife, he has a child. You can see it in this image here, right? Here is his wife and child. They're asleep. Here are all of his other buddies. They're asleep. And he's thinking, all right, I'm out, you know, and he kind of sneaks away in the night. In the version that we read, his wife was pregnant. She hadn't actually had the kid yet. And so we'll see how that kind of plays out toward the end of the book. Maybe we can leave that one as a cliffhanger for now. He goes to his father, and his father, of course, knows what happens when he leaves, right? We've seen the prophecy. When the Buddha leaves home, he's going to become this religious figure, and he's no longer going to be the great king that he could have been. And so the father says, hey, I will give you whatever you want. Please, just stay. And of course, Siddhartha, the prince, he says, then give me the best. No aging, no sickness, no death, no decay. Can his father give that to him? Of course not, right? Even if he wanted to, even if he spent all of his resources trying to give this to his son, he would be unable to. He would not be able to give his son the solution to the problem that he seeks. And so Siddhartha decides to leave home. Now, to me, it's not totally clear why he has to leave. What do you guys think? Why is he leaving home? Why does he feel like he has to leave home in order to solve this problem of suffering? He hasn't experienced suffering. I see. So he needs to like see the world. Like maybe the answer is out there. He just hasn't seen it yet.
And then you're like, I want to see what's like the movie. And your kids are like, okay. And then they show you the food. You can't always trust your mouth to see the background.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to think about it. I like that metaphor. So friends in TV land, if you didn't hear Lauren, she was saying if yeah, he needs to see for himself. He realized there's a lot that he hasn't seen. Yeah, and so Lauren compared it to censoring a movie, right? So if you watch a movie with your parents and they're always kind of skipping over the violent parts or the unsettling parts, the sad parts, everything else, then you can't really trust them anymore, right? And so there's a sense if he stays in the palace with his father will continue comforting him and coddling him and taking care of him and protecting him, right? And again, as people maybe are even around his age when he decided to leave, this is kind of a coming of age story, right? This is what you do is when you go to college, is you leave home and you go out to see the world as it is. And so maybe a lot of you are starting to have this same sort of experience where you're beginning to see sides of the world that perhaps you didn't even know were there, right? If you want to find some unsettling scenes, New York has plenty of them, right? You don't have to go much further than the subway to find them. Okay, very good. So the Buddha goes out into the world, and one reason too is he sees this guy, right? So he sees this this holy person, and he wants to follow that same path. So that's another reason, right? Is he not only wants to get away from the sheltered life that he's living, he sees somebody else who seems to have sort of figured this out. And so he joins the asceticism. So this is a word that maybe some of you have seen before if you've taken classes with me. Maybe you haven't seen it because it's kind of a special word if you haven't taken classes with me. So it could be a noun, right? Asceticism. Ascetic could be an adjective. It could also be a noun. You could call a person an ascetic, right? So it's sort of a pretty versatile term. And it refers to extreme self-discipline, avoidance of all forms of indulgence. That's the definition that I am giving to you. And there's a nice clip about this. We've got a whole half hour. So let's run it, shall we? Yeah, so as you watch this clip, I want you to think, what is the point of asceticism? You will see a few guys who we could call ascetics. We will see the Buddha living with some ascetics. And I want you to think, what are they trying to do here? What is the point of this ascetic lifestyle? Oh, let's pause our recording. Again, participants chat. Extreme discipline, avoidance of indulgence. What's the point? Why do people do this? Why was there that guy keeping his hands in the air? Why was there that guy with I don't know if you caught it, but he had a weird thing dangling from his tongue. Why would anybody put themselves through this kind of self-inflicted pain? What are they trying to achieve? Another way to think about it too is meditation, right? Maybe that's a more familiar kind of practice, right? People hurting themselves is not so familiar. Standing up for a really long amount of time. But why do people meditate? What is the point of meditation? Clearing the mind. Gaia says inner peace. How does meditation bring inner peace? Because I guess first of all, we can ask ourselves, does meditation require self-discipline? Kind of, right? I mean, it's not like super duper hard, but you gotta like sit in a posture, you gotta focus. It doesn't necessarily come easily. Have you guys tried meditation before? Yeah, it's a relatively popular thing these days. And so in order to really take it seriously, it takes a decent amount of discipline, practice, right? You have to kind of try relatively hard. Avoiding indulgence, it sort of makes sense, right? It'd be easy to indulge in all of these thoughts, but when you're meditating, you want to kind of focus on just one thought or focus on your breath or something like this. Self-control, determination. Yeah, so even though these practices might look a little bit weird, right? The guys who are hurting themselves, inflicting pain on their body, it's not as foreign as it seems, right? Do you guys ever put yourselves through pain in order to to achieve some sort of goal? Is that a familiar practice? I see at least one head nodding. Why are you nodding your head, Lori? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exercise, track, no pain, no gain. You guys ever heard this before? Of course you have. No pain, no gains with a Z. Is that a thing people talk about still? Yeah, exactly. So this whole culture of sports and exercise, there's some phrase like pain is weakness leaving the body. I feel like I've seen this on T-shirts. You guys know what I'm talking about? Glory lasts forever, but pain is temporary. Something maybe probably flip that around. Pain is temporary, glory lasts forever. Right? Again, we don't necessarily think of ourselves as being like ascetic practitioners when we do it, but in reality, running is painful. Running takes discipline, especially at the beginning. Right? You sort of get into a groove eventually. But even so, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes an avoidance of indulgence, right? The easier thing would be to like, I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to put my feet up and watch, somebody else play basketball rather than play it myself. And so I think it's not so far away from the way we live our lives, right? And in fact, the way we often approach even the class, right, is that we need discipline. We need to work hard. It might even be painful, but we're going to learn some things, damn it, and we're going to get those grades that we want. And so this ascetic lifestyle, even though on the face of it, it might look a little absurd, it's actually not so far away from the way that we lead our own lives, right? I would say you are all very disciplined people, particularly Mackenzie and Lauren, but everybody else out there in TV land, you guys are a little bit disciplined, maybe not as disciplined as in other circumstances. No, I'm just giving you a hard time. So in any case, what is the point of asceticism? I think as these examples are maybe beginning to tease out, there's a sense that we can achieve certain goals through this discipline, right? Through this willingness to put ourselves through pain and difficulty. Now, when it comes to this goal of suffering, can meditation help with suffering? Is that why people meditate? What do you guys think? People in the chat world, does meditation help people cope with suffering? Question mark. Yeah. How does it help? Yeah, absolutely. Helps people relax, help people clear the mind. People writing yes, it can in a way. Yeah. In fact, as actually, I couldn't quite tell who was talking about. That was you, Mackenzie. Right? Oh, was it Lauren? Okay. All right. The masks are playing tricks on me. I was like, wait, who's? And I usually wear glasses too, so I'm fuzzy, I'm tired, and I'm wearing a mask, and you're all wearing a mask. So please be patient with me. But yes, as Lauren is saying, yeah, therapists will often recommend people meditate. Even like doctors will prescribe meditation now. It's kind of a bizarre world we live in. I think 20 years ago that'd be impossible, but now that even happens. Maybe it's not common, but it definitely does happen. Let's see. Oh, the chat is blowing up. Helps people focus on something other than their suffering, forces you to be present, helps with gratitude and calming. Yeah, this is all great. And so I don't know if you guys have seen on Netflix, there's even a program called Headspace. Has anybody watched this before? It's kind of interesting. I watched the whole thing. I was thinking about trying to integrate it into class. Maybe we'll look at it at some point, but it wasn't quite that interesting. It was a little bit interesting. It has like these nice colors though, and so there's sort of a visual component to it. The guy who's talking has this very calming, soothing British accent, and he's basically telling us how to do what you guys are describing, right? How to calm down, how to be grateful, how to be focused in the present moment. Kevin says many things we suffer from could have been avoided by our poor choices. Having self-control and discipline can prevent that. Yeah. I think there is a sense, there's almost like an ethic in our society, and I think even beyond our society, right? Because even in ancient India, they're talking about this. Discipline does bring results, right? It's usually weakness and indulgence that leads to problems, and discipline and being able to sort of stick to your guns. And this is what will lead to success in life, right? Without discipline, there will be no success. Um, and so here, the Buddha is trying to apply this disciplined lifestyle to this question of suffering and how to deal with suffering. And it might not be obvious from the scene that we watched, but what's happening here is he's trying to kind of find, what to say, his mind or his soul. He's trying to find this thing that is beyond his body, right? These ascetics are identifying the body as the problem, right? Because if you think about it, what is it that dies? What is it that hurts? What is it that gets sick? What is it that gets old? It's our body, isn't it? Right? And so if our body is the thing that is causing us all of these problems, then what if we just kind of associated with something else and said, well, I am not my body. I am my soul, right? I am something other than my body. And if he finds a way to hold on to that, to meditate on that, right? And meditate and try to reach these states that are beyond his body, right? These very deep states of consciousness, there's a sense that maybe he will find an end to suffering, right? Because he will be able to leave his body, be freed from his body. There's this language of liberation, find liberation from suffering by being liberated from his body. But here we have this quotation here. He says, this too will not lead to liberation from suffering. He tries it out, right? And he even has a pretty good time while he's doing it. He might even be able to reach some really deep states of consciousness, like we saw in the Hollywood film. The snake comes up and kind of protects him from the rain. So he achieves almost like magical powers and all sorts of really interesting stuff. So of course, when he became an ascetic, he was like the best ascetic, right? And so that shouldn't be a big surprise after sort of the trends of his life. And so when he became a meditator, he was like the best meditator, and he was able to enter into some very deep, calming sort of spaces in his mind. But the problem is, even that comes to an end, right? He's going to wake up. The meditation has to stop, and then he's back where he started again, right? He's back just sitting on his cushion. He's back with these other ascetic guys. And so he starts this new plan. And kind of in line with what Kevin was talking about a moment ago, he begins to think, all right, I know what the problem is. It's not my body, it's desire. Why don't we, let's see, we've got 15 minutes left. Why don't we read a passage and talk about it, and then we can call it a day. So on page 47, it's chapter 7, that first page of chapter 7. We have finished talking about renunciation, right? He's left home, he's left his family, and now we're getting into austerity. You guys know this word austerity? It's basically a synonym for asceticism, austerity. Did you hear the kids say ascetic on the movie, right? So I'm not just making this word up. All right, so how about somebody reads this for us? We've got, you could read it from the slide, you could read it from the book. We've got this metaphor that we're working with. So the Buddha is hanging out with the ascetics. He had a flash of insight, and he developed these metaphors. A piece of driftwood. Could somebody please read that section, a piece of driftwood? Who would like to read? How about chat people? Like I said, participation is part of the class. And if you would like to participate, this is a great way. You could read from the slide even. Who wants to read?
I can do it.
Please.
Okay. A piece of driftwood that is soaking wet will not catch fire no matter how much it is rubbed. Just so, the body and the mind that are doused in desire are unable to reach liberation. Only a dry stick is able to catch fire. Just so, the body and mind must be separated from desire.
Okay, very good. So the Buddha has identified a new problem, right? It's not, the problem isn't having a body, right? The problem is desire and having a desire for particular states for your body. And the piece that I couldn't fit on here because it made the text too small says, even if the driftwood is only moist, this will still be the case. Just so, even if the body is kept apart from desire, if the mind is not kept apart, one remains unable to reach liberation. So he's creating this kind of complicated metaphor, but I think you guys should be able to figure it out, right? We've got soaking driftwood. Because it's so wet, we can't light it on fire. Have you guys had this experience before? You ever like gone camping and tried to light a fire with wet logs? It's not going to work, right? And so that part of the metaphor is pretty clear. So what is he trying to compare this to? What's the comparison that he's making? What is the moisture symbolizing here? Mind and body. Okay, yeah. So mind and body. If the mind and body are like the driftwood, what is the moisture? Moisture is desire. Yes, very good. Yes. So he has the sense if there's even a little bit of desire in him, then he will be unable to achieve enlightenment, right? It's desire's fault. That is what is causing him all these problems. And again, Kevin's comment is still, it's an excellent one. People suffer because of poor choices, and self-control and discipline can prevent that, right? There's the sense that it's our desire, it's our indulgence. That is what's causing us so many problems. And if we can learn to control it, right? To keep these desires away, to push them down, or even to get them out completely, then we will be able to achieve enlightenment. And so as a result, you can see him here, right? He starves himself. Because if you think about it, what would it even look like to live a life without desire? Could you live a life without desire? Is that even possible? Is it possible to live a life without desire? What would that look like? Not really. Why not, Kyle? Starving man desires food. Yeah. And so, yeah, to put it a little bit differently, I don't think you can live a life without desire, but possibly live a life without acting on desire. Have to remove yourself from society. Yeah. So you guys are thinking about this. This is great. And so we could separate the desires from acting on the desire. I think that's great. And so the Buddha is choosing not to act on his desires. And again, if you have experience with meditation, that's actually kind of part of the process, right? Is the desires pop up and you're supposed to kind of let them go, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? The desires pop up. They say, hey, you should go eat this thing or do this thing or see this thing or whatever. And then you say, nope, I'm meditating right now. I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to check Instagram. I'm not going to do anything. I'm meditating right now. I'm not going to follow that desire, right? I'm just going to focus. And so these lessons do show up in Buddhism, even if this is in a very, this is a very extreme form of it. Acting on desire, you have to move yourself from society. So Kyla is pointing out that in order to be in society, there's a certain amount of desire that's really required, right? And I think that's true, right? We have to desire to come to class. We have to desire to learn. We have to desire even to breathe, right? It's like even just very fundamental maintenance of yourself. Kyle was pointing out eating, right? Even just eating becomes a problem. If you're trying to live a life without desire, you will not eat, right? You will control every aspect of your eating. And of course, this is something that does happen, right? This isn't like some foreign crazy idea, right? There are Americans who look like this, even though they have food in the fridge, they choose not to eat it. So do you think this leads to enlightenment? Is this how he finds it? Desire for more than you need is a different story. So Kyle's talking about how maybe desire up to a certain point is not so bad, but desire beyond that point might cause some problems. Okay, well, I think we get the idea here. We get the reasoning here. And so ultimately, spoiler alert, he comes to a middle way, which is kind of what Kyle is pointing us to, right? We don't want to have too much desire, right? Because then we enter into the realm of greed. But does that mean we shouldn't have any desire at all? This is actually, it's a common misconception of Buddhism. When I first came to Manhattan College, I had a very empty office. I had like nothing in there. And my colleagues would walk by and they know I'm the Buddhism guy, right? And they would be like, oh, you have a very Buddhist office. And I was like, you're trying to be funny. It's not really working, because the point of Buddhism is not to have no desires. The point of Buddhism is not to have no possessions. It's just to be reasonable, right? A middle way. And so this is a term that we're going to see a lot. It comes into play here. It'll come into play in philosophy as well. This is more, we could say, almost ethical, but how to live your life, right? When it comes to desire, the Buddhists are not saying, and this, again, most people don't understand this, the Buddhists are not saying have no desires, right? The Buddha tried that, and he almost died in the process. It's sort of a horrible scene where like his mom is up in heaven and sees him suffering so immensely. And it's a very powerful image, right? Because it's almost like, what would your mother say if she knew how badly you were suffering? Well, that's exactly what happens in the book. And she comes down and she's like, hey, eat some food. No, I don't think she comes down to say that, but that's what she would say if she could come down. And so he starves himself almost to the point of death. And it is only after he actually eats some food, right? It did not seem he was going to achieve enlightenment through the embrace of sense pleasures, right? So if we think about the early part of his life, he's embracing the sense pleasures, right? You guys see that part? In this sort of middle part of his life, he's embracing pain, this thing that he couldn't get when he was at home, just like Lauren was saying a little while ago. And so he eventually decides to find this middle way between pain and pleasure, between what we could call asceticism and indulgence. And what does he do before he achieves enlightenment? Is he eats some food. It's a very powerful image in a way, right? Because this is somebody who is struggling with desire, struggling with suffering, trying to think, how should I be in this world? Where is the space for me and what I want? And he finds that, yes, you should eat. And so he does. And he achieves enlightenment. Okay, I know there are 5 minutes left, technically, but I'm out of slides, and I'm pretty tired, so I imagine you guys probably are too. Do you have any questions for me before we call it a day? How's that all sound? With our 5 minutes, why don't we look at the syllabus real quick? I was going to open Moodle, but I'd have to log in and stuff, and that's not worth doing. So let's look at the syllabus and see what is ahead. So we've already had our first assignment and we're feeling good about that, right? So we are in week 3 here. We just read 50 pages of the life of the Buddha, which might feel like a lot for one class, but of course we only meet once a week, so it's really not so bad. Next time we're going to go over enlightenment. We're going to have a little Kyon. So both of these are, Kyon is on Moodle. I only posted it once though, so you might have to scroll up to find Kyon if you haven't already downloaded it. The whole book is just one big file. Again, you're gonna need your own copy of this one, so hopefully you already got that. So we're going to read about enlightenment, then we'll finish it up the following week, and then we'll have an exam the week after that. So if you're thinking, there aren't any reading quizzes, I don't even have to read this book, I don't even have to get a copy of this book, you would be mistaken, right? Because of course the exam is going to cover everything that comes before it. And I will be pulling stuff from the book, things we didn't even talk about in class. Most of it will come from the slides though. So studying the slides are there to help you. They're what I decide are the most important things that we go over. So if you're wondering how to study for this class, the slides are there for you. Download the slides, look at those. And yeah, so the exam is still pretty far away, beginning of March, but as we keep moving in that direction. Please keep reading and keep coming to class with questions and comments and ideas, and you'll be ready to go when it finally comes here. So, all right, so that's all we got. Nice talking with everybody. Any final questions before we call it for the night? That's it? Okay. Good night, everybody.